The name of this talk is A Failure of Presidential Republics, Too Much Executive, Not Enough Parliament. And it's based on a lot of research that I'm doing that is ongoing. Nearly every presidential republic, which is our form of government, which I'll talk about, has at one time slipped into military dictatorship, single-party rule, or executive dictatorship, or a situation where every 4 years, every 6 years, the electorate is essentially electing a semi-dictator. There's two exceptions to that rule: Costa Rica and the United States of America. I always talk about the three essentials of government. All governments have internal and external military. All governments tax and spend. And all governments write, enforce, and interpret law. I train my students that if a politician is not talking about the L word, law, they're probably not saying much. I also wish we could strip the word legislation from our lexicon and just make people say law, because that is what government is about. It's about writing law. In our system of government, that is the legislative branch, right? The Congress, the 100 senators, the 435 members of the House of Representatives, enforcing law, which is the presidency, and the executive branch, and the judiciary interprets law. So we have what's called a separation of power. We forget that all governments have to balance individual rights with social order. I may have the freedom and a Second Amendment right to have the weapon of my choice, but social order also says that I want the freedom to go to a movie theater or a mall without always having to look over my shoulder. It doesn't feel very free. And it doesn't feel very free to have freedom of speech if you're living under a bridge. We also have to understand that governments try to balance individual rights and social order. So there's about 90 presidential republics, about 56 to 60 parliamentary republics in the world. Most of the countries of the European Union, Norway, Sweden, Germany. Of course, you're probably familiar with the United Kingdom, what's called the Westminster system. I'll talk about that. And there's also semi-presidential republics. In our system, the president is the head of state and they're head of the government. So they veto laws, sign treaties, conduct foreign policy, but also invite the New England Patriots to the White House, or pardon a turkey, do the symbolic things, okay? Presidential republics routinely, at some point in their history, give way to military dictatorships, coup d'etats. You saw this in Honduras in 2009, where Zelaya was pushed out of office because of a problem I'll talk about in a little bit. Maybe I'll talk about it right now. Dual legitimacy. Both the president and the legislative branch, the National Assembly in Venezuela, can claim that they speak for the people because they were both directly elected. And there is no mechanism in a presidential republic to resolve that dispute. Original Constitution, the first 120 years of the Republic, only Congress submitted a budget. It's only recent history to some extent where a president would negotiate a budget for the 15 cabinet level agencies. To declare war, I don't even have to tell you about the power of U.S. presidency there. We also have a number of progressive new members of Congress who are speaking sort of a left populism and trying to sort of make the Democratic Party the traditional Franklin Delano Roosevelt Party and contrast it with the Republican Party. And we also have a few interesting times throughout history. These are the new leaders of Spain. Spain had a long history of dictatorship and presidential republic, and they switched to a parliament in 1978. You have the Women's March, you have the Poor People's Campaign, Reverend Barber, and my favorite is the Velvet Revolution in Armenia, which changed their government from a semi-presidential system, which was a hybrid, into a parliamentary system. And they now have a popular form of government in Armenia. Last one, the most successful presidential republic in the world is not Costa Rica, although I would say it's probably easily second. It's Switzerland. And that's because it's really like a parliament. The Swiss have a national assembly that elect a 7-member presidency known as, I love talking about this because it's just so cool, known as a federal council. And the federal council elects the presidents for 1-year terms, and the presidents then become symbols of the nation and sort of spokespeople, and they they trade off year after year. And it's actually been stable since the 19th century, and since 1959, all 4 major parties have had representation. So that's Switzerland. The last thing I'll say is, when I talk about Africa and South America, I also want to mention that on a positive note, most of those presidential republics have been able to turn around, that time of military rule and build something better and reform their constitutions in some way. I mean, although you do see Honduras, you do see Nicaragua, you do see the situation in Venezuela today, which are very difficult. And also to say, when we talk about Africa, keep in mind that the majority of countries in sub-Saharan Africa have raised their life expectancy 10 to 15 years in a very short period of time. And Africa has, a stronger civil society than ever, African countries do. So even though there have been these big lapses in presidential republics, you do have some scholars that will defend the stability of this form of government based on how some changes have been made to improve those dire situations.